don't judge me, okay? Don't judge me for my ends. This is how I work. Hi there, my name's Amelia and I'm from Mima Makes. This is episode 2 of my podcast where every month I run through my finished projects and my works in progress and my planned projects, mainly crochet and knitting, but I do dabble in some other crafts here and there. But today's episode is all about crochet and knitting. I am a new crochet designer and new YouTuber too. And I will pop all of my details in the description if you want to have a see what I'm up to on like my social media and things like that. And in this podcast, I'm actually going to be running my first giveaway. It's a pattern giveaway, and they're not my patterns, they're patterns from a fellow YouTuber and designer. So if you're interested in some free patterns, then I will put all of the details for this giveaway right at the very end of this podcast. We're going to dive straight into the projects because there's a lot of things I want to talk about. So I'm going to try and make this podcast a little bit shorter than my last one because I was exhausted and it was really long and it took ages to edit. So this episode is going to be a little bit quicker, I hope. I'm aiming for under 1 hour, but we'll see how we go because if you watch my last episode, you know I like to talk and I go off on tangents. So yeah, let's see how we go. But yeah, we'll dive right in. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is actually what I'm wearing, which is this really lovely knit shawl that I made in, I think it was about 2018. And it is probably my only proper shawl in that it is big and it wraps around me and it hugs me. A lot of my other shawls, because I went through a shawl knitting phase in like 2016 to 2018, they're more like scarves. They're not very long and they're not very deep and they're beautiful, but they're more like scarves, whereas this is my like proper shawl, like wrap it round me on a cold winter's day shawl. So yeah, I can't exactly remember the pattern. I think it was called like textured shawl or something. So I'll put it on the screen now. But it was a really lovely knit. I remember it being really lovely TV knitting. And because you've got these stripes of this, let me just bring it close to the screen, of that texture stitch and then stockinette, and then the edging is garter stitch. It was really, there was a lot of variation because sometimes you'd just be doing stockinette and sometimes you'd be doing the textured stitch. So it actually knitted up. I remember it knitted up really quickly. It did not take me long at all. It is in Aran weight yarn though, so that might have been why all of my other shawls are in like sock weight or lace weight yarn. But yeah, this is in Aran weight yarn. I can't remember what size needles I used. I will link to my Ravelry project page in the description if this is a shawl you fancy knitting. Would definitely recommend it. So the yarn that I used is Debbie Bliss Rialto, which you know I am a fan of. It's an extra fine merino, which is my favourite yarn to use. And it's in this gold colour. And again, I have got a couple of balls left over somewhere, so I will put what colour I used here. But it's that golden mustardy colour that I'm obsessed with and have been obsessed with for years and years and years. And I don't think I actually ever blocked this shawl. So I probably should block it, but it's already quite drapey, but the edges are curling, like you can see that curl there. But yeah, so I should probably block it. It needs washing anyway. So yeah, that's what I'm wearing for this podcast. And now let's get to the stuff that I finished between my last podcast and this podcast, which is I aimed to do it at the beginning of May, but I wasn't very well, so I've been putting it off. So today is, what day is it today? So today is Saturday the 13th of May. So I'm like 2 weeks late because I aim to do them at the beginning of each month. So it's more like what I've done in the last 6 weeks rather than last month this time. But I haven't actually finished that much. So anyways, let's get to it. So the first, I've got 2 pairs of finished knitted socks. This was my first pair of sock weight socks ever. I've done double knit and Aran weight socks before, but I've not done sock weight socks. So these socks, I did talk about them in the last episode. They are in the Gandalf colourway, which was a hand-dyed yarn from Lonely Mountain Yarns, who I will link in the description. She does a bunch of Lord of the Rings themed yarns, and I have bought a couple more of her sock sets because she keeps, every 2 weeks, she just puts out more and more amazing Lord of the Rings sock sets. So I'm kind of accumulating a little collection of Lord of the Rings sock sets at the minute. I won't show them. I'm not going to show my yarn acquisitions in this podcast. I want it to focus on projects rather than like, oh, look at all the yarn that I've got, you know? So yeah, anyway, this was my first pair of sock weight socks. They were toe up. I'm still undecided if I prefer toe up and cuff down. You'll find out, I'm getting into sock knitting. I never used to understand why it was such a big thing online, you know, like why so many people are into knitting socks. But now I've knitted a couple of pairs, like they're addictive. They're actually addictive, and I love the idea of having just like 10 pairs of handmade socks that I can wear in the winter. Like, yeah, I'm addicted. I'm gonna say it now, I'm addicted. So yeah, so the pattern I used for this was a toe up sock, just vanilla sock with an afterthought heel. I wouldn't recommend the pattern. I think the instep is really tight. I don't think the afterthought heel goes over enough stitches because the instep is really tight across my foot, and it seems like it's not just me. If you look in the pictures of other people's socks, it's the same issue. So yeah, but I don't think I'll do an afterthought heel again. I didn't enjoy doing it at all. I prefer the heel flap and gusset. So yeah, so those are my Gandalf socks, and then I've cast on and finished off, and I did finish these in April, so these are actually in April, are these socks here, and you can see it's got this strip of lace down opposite, so they're on opposite sides of the sock, so it runs down the outside part of your foot. So the pattern is called Winter's Frost by This Handmade Life, and it's a free pattern on Ravelry. It's a cuff down sock with a heel flap and gusset. The only change that I made is I did it over 68 stitches because I've got quite wide feet, and the pattern is for 64. And I didn't do a slip stitch heel. I just did a stockinette heel because I'm not going to be wearing these with shoes. These are going to be house socks. Like, they're white. I'm not wearing white socks outside. Hand knit socks, they'll get filthy. So these are like inside socks. Yeah, and I really enjoyed the pattern. The yarn I've used is a hand-dyed speckled yarn from Hedgerow Yarns, who does the best speckled yarn in my opinion, and she's such good value for money. So yeah, so that is her yarn there. I've got about 50 grams of this yarn left as well, so I'm tempted to make another pair of socks, but I've got so many sock sets that I just need to actually knit some more socks out of the yarn that I haven't used yet, rather than this one. This one can just stay in my stash for a bit. So yeah, so those are my 2 finished pairs of socks. So all of my finished objects are knitting. They're not crochet, because the crochet projects I've been working on are big ones, so whereas the knitting projects are small ones. So my other knitted project is this hat that I did talk about in my last podcast. The pattern is Hat for Thorin by Nicole from Common Thread Fibre, and it is a pattern that is the cable pattern is inspired by the armour that Thorin wears in the Hobbit films. And I just really I don't mind the Hobbit films, but they're not accurate to the book, are they? But yeah, anyway, I really love the cable pattern, and the fact that it's like Tolkien themed is just a bonus. And I knit it in sport weight yarn, which is quite hard to find in the UK. So I actually ended up ordering off the internet an American brand of superwash sport weight yarn, but from a British company. And it was Valley Yarns Superwash Sport. It's 100% wool. And I really enjoyed knitting with it, and it's really soft and lovely, but it just attracts so much cat hair and fluff. Like, my cat is like 3/4 white, and just every time I think I've picked off all of the bits of her cat fur off of this hat, I just find more, it just accumulates fluff. But it's going to go away until the autumn anyway, so I don't really need to worry about that. Like, it's May. I'm not going to be wearing this hat now. I'm not going to try it on because it will make my hair go really frizzy. So what I'll do is I'll pop some footage on now of me wearing the finished hat. So I did knit. So the hat comes in 4 head circumference sizes, and I knit a size down. I should have been a size 3, but I did a size 2 because the fit of the hat in the pattern is a slouchy hat, and I have a really weird shaped head. The back of my head is flat, and I have quite a big head circumference for a woman. Like, if I buy commercial hats, they don't fit me. They pop off because they're so tight. Or no, they pop off because of the shape of the thing, or I can't get them on my head because they're so tight. So I was a bit worried this would be the same, but it doesn't. It fits me snugly. It's a little teeny bit too tight, teeny bit, but it's like I've blocked it, and that's really helped actually. So yeah, I just need to make the pom-pom to go on the top. I'm going to do it in the same colour yarn. I just need to actually pull my fingers out and do the pom-pom. But because I can't wear this hat right now, I've got no motivation to put the pom-pom on it yet, but I should just do it so it's out the way and it can go away with all the winter things, and all the summer things can come out. So yeah, so that's that hat. really enjoyable knit. It was my 3rd cable pattern, and the cables, I couldn't put them down. Nicole, she has an amazing podcast, so if you are into like nerdy knits and you don't mind a bit of swearing, like, her podcasts are so much fun. She's just such a good podcaster. She's like my podcast goals. So yeah, that is all of my finished projects. So now we're going to start working my way through my whips, and some of them are quite exciting. So yeah, I'll start with the crochet whips because we've just talked a lot about knitting. So we'll talk about crochet next. You might remember in the last podcast, if you watched it, I showed off my granny stripes that I was doing for the Granny Love Crochet Along in March and April. And I just wasn't in love with it. So I was talking about if I was going to frog it. So I did frog it, and this is what I'm making instead. It is a scrappy giant granny square blanket, another giant granny square blanket, but it's so much fun. Like, look at all those different colours. It's so much fun to make. And like picking the next colour is so much fun, and it's really addictive to crochet. And like, I can just be a bit crazy with the colour placements because it's a scrap blanket. So the reason why I'm making a scrap blanket is I don't actually have a huge amount of scraps in double knit acrylic. I do have scraps actually. They're more like leftovers though, because it's more like 20 grams. I had some smaller ones, but mainly like 20 to 50 gram leftovers. So yes, what I'm doing is I wanted to make a blanket out of them. It's all acrylic. I think some of them like acrylic blend double knit yarns. So my problem is that I don't want to use 100% acrylic yarn anymore, and they're like the most popular yarn for crochet blankets in my, like, from what I've seen online. So I don't want to use them anymore because of the environmental impact, and I just prefer wool and cotton, the feel of them. So I'm making that change, and part of making that change is using up my stash, and this is what my stash is going to become, and I love it. This is 2 afternoons worth of crochet. 2 afternoons. I couldn't put it down. 2 afternoons. And it's like baby blanket size. Like, I could put an edging on this and give it to a baby. It's like baby blanket size already. So yeah, I'm just going to keep going until I get fed up with it. It might end up really, really big. It might not. We'll see. I'm probably going to have some leftovers though. I'm still going to have some double knit acrylics left. So I'm tempted to maybe make a scrappy cardigan or something, but we'll see when I'm finished. So yeah, that is my giant granny square blanket, and I've put it down for now because I've been working on my next project because it's kind of higher priority. But once my next crochet project is done, this is gonna get crocheted on a lot because I'm really excited to have it. And especially before it gets too hot, because I don't like crocheting with acrylic in the hot because it gets all squeaky. You know? Oh, that's my cat coming in. Hello. Wanna come say hi to everyone? Yeah? Should I tell them about how you brought a live mouse into the house last night? She's not looking at me anymore. Yeah, that's my cat Molly. So yeah, I don't know if she'll let me pick her up and you can say hi, but she looks quite sleepy, so I'll just leave her alone to sleep. So, my other crochet project started in November. This is the first blanket that I designed as a pattern specifically to be sold and as a pattern, and not a blanket I made just for me because I liked it and I fancied designing a blanket. So this one has a purpose in mind, and it actually inspired the Mima Makes logo. I will pop the logo on the screen now and then I'll bring up the blanket. So can you see the design of that half hexagon is what inspired my logo. So yeah, so this is the Hexadaisy blanket. I don't know yet if it's going to be Hexadaisy or Hexadaisy with an A or an I. Not quite decided yet. But yeah, so this is the pattern. Well, this is the blanket, not the pattern. So yeah, so it is made in a mixture of Stylecraft Special Double Knit, which is acrylic, and James C. Brett double knit with merino, which is an acrylic blend. It's got some merino in there as well. It's mainly Stylecraft Special though. The white is actually the James C. Brett yarn and the blue is James C. Brett, but the rest is Stylecraft Special Double Knit. Yeah, and I really love daisies and I love crocheting with hexagons, and I just think they're so much fun. Like, I like granny squares. We all know that I like granny squares at this point, especially floral granny squares. They're my jam. But hexagons are also my jam. this blanket here, for example. So yeah, so I like crocheting with hexagons, so I really like that I got to combine the fact that I love daisies with the fact that I love hexagons, and the Hexadaisy Blanket was born, basically. So yeah, so I'm almost finished. I'm on the very last round of the border. Let me see if I can show you what I'm doing for the border. Someone told me the border that I'm doing is picot stitch. I kind of made it up myself. I called it a frilly border, and then I put up a quick tutorial, and someone told me it was a picot border. So that's the border that I'm doing. It does kind of look like picot stitch, actually. So yeah, so that's the border that I'm doing. And I'm like halfway around the blanket, and then it will be finished. And the pattern, I've just got to edit and insert the photos of the border, then translate it into UK terms, because all of my paid patterns are US terms and UK terms. So you can choose which one you prefer to use. You haven't got to do any translating or anything like that. So I need to do that, and then it's ready for testing. And I did, just before I started filming this podcast, put out my call for testers, but it will be closed by the time this podcast goes out. So you'll have to wait for the pattern release. So yeah, I'm really excited about this pattern release, if I'm honest. Yes, I haven't, don't judge me, okay? Don't judge me for my ends. This is how I work. I do the ends all in one sitting at the end, okay? Well, not necessarily one sitting, but I have woven in a few, but like, I find it relaxing to sit there with a film on and just weave ends in and not have to worry about the tension of my stitches or anything like that, because I'm just weaving ends in and snipping them off. I find it really relaxing. I find it really mindful, if you're into mindfulness. So yeah, but I know this is a lot of people's nightmare, is all of these ends to sew in, but don't worry, it's not my nightmare. I did this on purpose, but don't judge me. So yeah, so that's that blanket. I'm hoping to get the pattern finished this coming week. So today's a Saturday. I'm aiming for Monday, but I'm giving myself a loose deadline of Friday to get the pattern finished and out to my testers. And then it will be in testing for a few weeks, because I'm not asking them to do the whole blanket, just parts, just a hexagons, half hexagons, a couple of each, then the joining method and the border, just so all parts of my pattern have been tested. And then I will go through final editing phase, and then it'll be out. I originally aimed for the end of May. That's not going to happen anymore. I'm now thinking mid-June, maybe late June. It will be out by the end of June, basically, is what I'm saying, because I want it out by the end of June. So if I've got that motivation, I'll do it. And there's a reason why I want it out in June, is I want it out before July, because I was going to do a news section at the end, but I think I'll just talk about it now. So HOBBYCRAFT, which is a craft chain in the UK, every July they have a crochet along granny square blanket where they have 25 different designers design a square. I think you can see where this is going. So yeah, so I'm designing one of the squares for the HOBBYCRAFT Granny Square Month blanket that's in July. So I kind of want this blanket out of my brain before July. I want it out into the world before July, basically, so that I can focus on the other things that I'm doing in July. I've already submitted, I can't tell you what the pattern is. I've already submitted it, but I think when you see the pattern, you will know it's mine. That's all I'm saying on it, is I think I have a style, I think I have a colour palette, and I think I love flowers. I'm not saying any more about it. So yeah, that look out for that in July, because I know the the Granny Love Crochet Along, which was a giant granny square blanket that we did a crochet along for in the Mima Makes Crochet Club Facebook group, which I will link in the description if you fancy coming in and joining us, showing me the projects that you've made. I love it. I love it when someone posts a picture of something they've made using one of my patterns. It's so good, and I love seeing everyone's Granny Love giant granny square blankets. It was so much fun. So yeah, if you fancy coming and joining us, you can. I'll link it down in the description. So yeah, so that crochet along is finished, and then in the group I had a few messages and comments asking what's next for Mima Makes. Are we going to do another crochet along? Come on, I need to know. And I was like, I have all these plans, but nothing's set in stone. But now I wasn't allowed to say anything about the HOBBYCRAFT thing, but now I can say that yeah, in July there's Granny Square Month Blanket Crochet Along, and one of the squares is mine if you want another crochet along to do. I'm not involved in like the pattern support or anything, I've just provided the pattern. But if you're looking for a crochet along project, maybe that's a good one for you, because I'm sure there'll be some really fun. So it's a really fun and colourful blanket. So yeah, if that's something you're into, then I will link that in the description also. Why not? Why not? I'll just do a bunch of links in the description so you can go and find some stuff. So, okay, so the last crochet project I have to talk about is, I don't want to call it a whip. It's not a work in progress. I've abandoned it. And I spoke a lot about it in the last podcast, and I'm really sad that I've had to abandon it because I really like the colours. So yeah, anyway, so in the last podcast I did a granny square, I'll put some footage on the screen now. I had a granny square hexagon cardigan that's quite a popular thing at the minute, where you make 2 hexagons, you fold them in a particular way, you sew them together, and you've got a cardigan. And I did a series of tutorials for that in January and February on TikTok that are now on YouTube as well, that I will link in the description to this sort of cardigan. So I was like, right, I'm going to write up, a few people asked me for a written pattern, so I was like, okay, I'll make another one, I'll write it up as I go. And I had some gifted yarn, and I've made one of the hexagons, and I had a reaction to the yarn. I have really sensitive skin, but yeah, look, let's just look how pretty it is just for a minute. So that's one, can you see what I mean? This is the sleeve, and then this will be the body of the cardigan. So that's how it works, how the pattern works. So the yarn that I'm using is Yarn Smith's Create Chunky, which is a new brand of acrylic yarn in the UK, and I had a reaction to it. I crocheted this over 2 days, and I was really confused at first because my hands were just a bit itchy, and that's only ever happened to me once before when I used 100% alpaca yarn. I have sensitive skin anyway, but I'm usually alright with yarn if I'm honest. But yeah, I've never ever had a reaction to acrylic yarn before, and I won't put a picture up or anything, but my hands itched for 2 days after I stopped crocheting with it, and I had red patches all between my fingers. And I used this yarn hoping that I would be able to wreck it, because I don't want to use 100% acrylic yarn anymore, but I know that a lot of people's budgets mean that that's the only yarn they can use. So I wanted to make sure I was recommending the right acrylic yarn to people in the UK. So I thought, well, I need to try this brand. I've never used this brand. And I posted and no one else has had this reaction to yarn, so maybe it's just me or the ones that I've got, or something that they've washed the yarn in. I don't know, but I can't finish this cardigan, which is really sad. So yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to do with this, because I've got a massive bag of yarn, and I've got some more that wasn't for this project in the back room as well, and it was gifted yarn from the yarn company as well, so I feel a bit bad if I give it away, but I think I'm going to have to. Someone on Instagram has offered to adopt this project, so maybe I'll do that and they can finish it off and keep the cardigan, because I'm not going to be able to keep the cardigan. I would give it to my mum. My mum's started learning crochet and she's got really good really quick, so I could give it to my mum, but it's just not her colours. Like pale pink is not her colour. So yeah, but mum, if you want this, because I know you watch this, if you want this, let me know. I've made half a cardigan, do you want to finish it? I've got some navy blue for the cuffs and around the edge. So yeah, that was really disappointing that I'm going to have to abandon that. And now I don't really know what to do, because I don't really have any more chunky yarn to use for my chunky cardigan, so I might have to make it an Aran yarn instead. So I think that's all of my crochet works in progress. Here is my next project. It is on a cable that is too short, so don't judge it. And there's bloody bits of yarn wrapped all around it. Give me a minute. This is a knitted t-shirt. So yeah, we've got this lace panel at the bottom. The pattern is called, so I think it's like spelt Tegna, but it's pronounced Tegna, I believe, by Caitlin Hunter. And it's a t-shirt with this lace panel at the bottom. So I'll show you. Let me just stretch it out, because obviously the lace, well, if I finish this, the lace will need blocking. I'll talk about that in a minute. So yeah, it's got like this lace panel at the bottom, You can see there. And then this is, I'm on the stockinette body. I did knit, because I have quite wide hips and I wanted a loose fit, I knitted a size up for the hips, and then I did some A-line decreases that I've now finished to bring it in a little bit to the bust size that I am, because I have wider hips than I do bust. I'm a big girl, so it's not uncommon. So yeah, so that's what I did, and I'm using 2 strands of lace weight yarn held together to make this beautiful marl between cream and gold, and that's Debbie Bliss Rialto lace, so Rialto yarn, yarn again. It's expensive, but I did get some cheap a few years ago, so this is from that. I wouldn't buy it full price. So yeah, in like a gold colour and a cream colour held together. We just grab the balls of yarn. So in those 2 colours held together. These are my second ball of each. So I've got quite far. You know, I've knit up over the hips. I'm at the waist, about approximate waist point now. So my issue is I started knitting this intending it to be a lightweight, because I get cold so easily and I like wearing summer dresses. So I thought, well, I'll knit myself a lightweight, like knitted t-shirt, or maybe with longer sleeves, maybe not. I don't know if I'd go down to like 3/4 sleeves maybe. I was just going to decide when I got there. So I've got plenty of yarn. So I did that and I knitted it, and I was like, well, these are lace weight yarn and the pattern calls for like 3.5mm needles. So I don't really want to just use 1 strand because it'll be too lacy. So I held 2 together, and that was a mistake, because this yarn is extra fine merino, and it's not like it's a stretchy, bouncy lace weight yarn. So it's made a warm, too warm, woolly, squishy knit. So I think I made a mistake in my yarn choice. I think I should have either used like a cotton, or maybe like a sock weight, 1 strand of like a sock weight yarn, but using 2 strands of this bouncy lace weight, which I think almost make, because it's quite thick lace weight, like it's almost like a light sport rather than lace, even though it's called lace weight. So it's made it too warm. Like, I put it over my hand and my hand is sweating now. It is warm and thick, and that is not what I want. I don't want a thick and warm. I don't want to turn this. I thought about it. I thought about turning it into like a transitional jumper, like doing long sleeves, and it would be like a spring or autumn thing. But that's not what I wanted for this in this pattern, because this lace bit around here is not something I would wear over jeans or anything, because I think it pulls too much attention to my large hips and tummy. So I'm thinking about frogging it. I haven't worked on it for about 4 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. About 4 weeks. It was before I even started the hat for Thorin. So I'm thinking about frogging it, but I'm putting it off because I haven't decided 100% yet. So yeah, any advice? Whether you think this would make a nice jumper, or whether I should frog it and maybe use the yarn for a less lacy pattern. So the other thing is I'm going to have to quite heavily block this lace because of how springy the yarn is. That is going to need a heavy block, which is going to be really, like when I would only wear it for like a couple of days before washing, I'm probably going to have to block it every time that I wash it, and that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted something that would hold the lace, so that if I just laid it flat it would be fine. So I think I went wrong with my yarn choice here. I should have used some of my collection of sock weight yarn. So yeah, so that's my Tegna Tee t-shirt. I don't know. Any advice, any opinions? Because I really love the look of the yarn together. I love that mould sort of look by holding the 2 together, but I just want to make maybe a plain t-shirt shaped in it with no lace. So I could frog the lace and knit on an edge in here. That's a really good idea. I could do that. I could frog the lace so that I'm not wasting all this bit of knitting here. Knit on another edging, or even a crocheted edging, and then follow the rest of the pattern to get that t-shirt shape and get rid of the lace. I might do that. That's a good idea. I'm surprised I've not thought of that before now. But yeah, if you have any suggestions for that, I would really appreciate it. And then my last whip, we're going to grab this book from behind me because this is what this whip is. So I got this really cute bag as like a last one of the stock on Etsy. So with mushrooms on, and this is what I'm going to be keeping my sock projects in because I was fed up of them being like everywhere and things, needles flapping out and stuff. So I've knitted, so it's another pair of knitted socks, I should have said that. It's another pair of knitted socks, and I've done one, and it's a Shortie Socks. So if you're not familiar with sock knitting, they're like trainer socks or like ankle socks. So they don't have a very long, you'll see what I mean, look. They just have that ribbed bit there. They're not blocked. This is, I haven't even woven the ends in. I kind of wanted to play around and try a different heel and a different toe because I bought this book. So I got this book, which is the Sock Knitting Bible by Lynn Rowe. There. And it's a really good book. Like there are patterns for socks in the back, but there are 3 recipes for just vanilla socks, toe up, cuff down and knitted flat. And then there's all different sorts of heels and toes and cuffs. And like, let me just show you. Those are all the different cuffs. And like, where's my heel page? And there's all different heels and toes and stuff that you can mix and match in your sock recipes. So that's what I thought I'd do, is I'd pick a heel, I'd pick a toe, and I'd knit a pair of Shortie socks. So that's what I did. So I did a heel flap and gusset again, but this time I did garter stitch on the heel. Can you see? Because like I could have done a slip stitch heel for this, but I tried doing the slip stitch heel and it took so long. So I did a garter stitch heel, which is a bit quicker. And like these are trainer socks, like they're not like precious to me, you know? Whereas my other socks are precious to me. This one isn't. And then I was going to do the 4 pointed toe where you do your decreases spaced into 4 points around the sock for the toe. But I did it and it really did not fit my toes very well. So I ripped it out and I did a rounded toe instead, which is the same toe that I did on those speckled socks that I showed you in my finished project. And that fits my foot really well. It fits my feet better than the wedge toe. I made these speckled socks. This is the speckled socks that I'm talking about. I made these a bit too short. I should have done an extra 4 rows on their heel, I think. But these ones fit me much better. So I think it's a lot of practice, isn't it, to know what stitch count and row counts you need that will fit your feet. And that's kind of what I'm learning at the minute, is how to fit my feet with a pair of socks. And I'm kind of enjoying it. I really like I've worn the Gandalf socks a couple of times and I just really like the fact that I'm just in the house and I'm just like, my feet are happy because they're wrapped in my knitting, you know? So yeah. But yeah, I saw an idea in this book as well. She doesn't really talk very much about the idea. It was just that, oh, you could do this. Is a heel, a pair of socks without the heel, where you've just got spiral ribbing. So I might do that next, but I'm not sure. So that is all of my finished projects and my works in progress projects for this month. And then the next section would usually be what my planned projects are, but I want to keep this podcast a bit shorter because I want to try and preserve some of my energy. I have chronic illnesses, which mean that I don't have very much energy per day. So I'm having a good day today. So me and my partner are going to try, when he gets back from the gym, we're going to go into the garden and do some repotting of some plants and just hang out in the garden for a bit because it's a beautiful day outside today. So yeah, so we're going to go and do that. So I'm going to make this podcast a little bit shorter. That was what I was saying. I'm sorry. I go off on tangents on my podcast. That's just me. So yeah. Let's move on to the Q&A session. Right, so I've got my laptop and I've got my questions here. So one of them is a question I didn't get round to last time, and the other 2 are questions from my last podcast in the comments. So if you have any questions that you want me to answer in next month's podcast, just bob them down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them in my next podcast. So we've got 3 today. 2 are crochet related, 1 or knitting related. So 2 are craft related, 1 is not. So the question that I missed last time was from Angela, and she posted in the Mima Makes Crochet Club Facebook group when I asked if anyone had any questions they wanted me to answer in a podcast. So she asked, when I'm stumped in a pattern and it's not possible to contact the pattern creator, what's the best remedy? So in general, if the pattern designer is active, you should be able to email them for pattern support especially if it's a paid pattern, like I offer that. If you ever have any problems with any of my patterns, my email address is there on the pattern for you to just send me an email. So if you cannot get in contact with that designer, I have bobbed some notes down of it. I had a couple of ideas of what you could do instead. So the first thing, I think, when you've got a project and you're not sure about the pattern, so I have this with knitting. What I do is I take a step back from my project. I put my project away. It's not there looking at me. I'm not seeing it and thinking, oh God, I just put it away so I can't see it, in a cupboard, under the bed, whatever, wherever you want to put it, and I just leave it. And sometimes I'll leave it a week or two, sometimes it'll be years, and then I go back to it and think, right, I'm looking at this with fresh eyes. What went wrong last time and how can I fix it? So it's the same as what I did with that cardigan that I talked a bit about in the last podcast that I've not worked on at all since the last podcast, that I put it away for like 3 years and then got it back out, and I was like, oh, that's the mistake I made. That's why the pattern doesn't make any sense. So that's the first thing you could do. The second thing you could do is you could post on like the Mima Makes Crochet Club Facebook group or another sort of crochet or knitting related group, or on Instagram, because the craft community is quite active on Instagram. So things like that, and ask for support, like, has anyone else made this pattern, or can anyone help me decipher this pattern? So that is always an option as well. And then my last suggestion is actually on Ravelry. So if the pattern that you want to use is on Ravelry, then have a look on Ravelry at the pattern page, because often there's comments or reviews at the top. Sometimes there's forum posts on Ravelry about a particular pattern. Some designers have their own like forum, part of the thought forum on Ravelry, and different threads. So have a look on Ravelry to see if you can actually find if anyone else has had this problem. And the other thing is a lot of people put up photos and project notes on their Ravelry project pages. I am going to do a few videos about Ravelry in the future when I get round to it, because it's quite confusing to use for new people. But basically you can add your own project with the yarn and the pattern that you're using, and on there you can actually read other people's notes in their projects, and you can sort them by most helpful. So sometimes that helps, is like, oh, this feels too tight, and then you sort the projects by most helpful. When you read the first couple pattern notes, you're like, oh, it's a problem with the pattern and not me, or oh, I was doing this wrong. So that can help as well as looking on Ravelry. So those are my suggestions for if you come with that. And then the next question is a craft related one again, and that's from, I hope I'm saying this right, Masuga Nut, who has I don't know if you're a woman or a man, but you comment on a lot of my videos, so thank you so much for your support. And they asked a question about falling out of love with a project. So what they said is they've fallen out of love. They left a very long comment. So in summary, was asking about what to do when you fall out of love with a project so much you can't even stand to look at it. And the example that they gave was they were doing join as you go hexagons for their children for a blanket, and the end of the comment was, am I being a quitter, or have you experienced this too? Oh yes, have I experienced this? I am a strong believer that if you are not enjoying a project, there is no point in forcing yourself to do it. For most people, crochet and knitting is a hobby. It's a hobby. So don't put pressure on yourself. Enjoy it. If you're working on a project and you're not enjoying it anymore, you've got two options. Either frog it and make something you will enjoy, or do what I said earlier about putting it away for a bit and coming back to it. Like, I have 2 blankets that are upstairs under the bed that are still works in progress from 2013 and 2014, and I just can't bring myself to finish them. But I've not frogged them, and but I've also not worked on them at all in that time. But I'm not ready to give them up. I will get to them when I get to them. And it's the same with a lot of my projects, like this sampler blanket that I talked a lot about in the last podcast. Oh, I hope that doesn't fall down. That sampler blanket. I actually started this in 2018. I made about 12 of the squares in 2018 and I got a bit bored. So I moved on to something else, and then I got it back out just before Christmas or just before New Year's, around that time. And then I finished it in March. So sometimes having a break from your project helps a lot. And it seems like the project you're talking about with the Join As You Go hexagons are probably quite a project that you want to finish because it's for your children. So maybe put them away, maybe think, right, I'm not gonna make a decision about whether to frog this project or whether to continue with this project for a year, for example, or whatever time limit you want to set. Put it away, move on to something else. And then maybe at some point it'll like, oh yeah, I've got that project, I quite fancy working on that now. And if that doesn't happen, then frog it maybe. So yeah, that's my advice on that. Is it happens to me a lot. I do this a lot. You might find, oh yeah, I've just finished this project that I started 5 years ago, because that's big projects. I'm not good with big projects. Mainly knitted garments I'm bad at finishing, and crochet blankets I'm bad at finishing. So yeah, so that's my advice on that one. And then the next question was from Isla, and she commented on my last YouTube video as well. And she asked, what kind of books do you like reading? As a fellow crafter and book nerd, I like hearing what others are reading along with their craft. So yeah, I can totally talk to you about reading. So I used to be a really big reader. Like Sunday used to be my reading day where I would read a lot. And I used to read a lot before bed and things like that. But since I've been unwell, I have trouble with my concentration and reading, so I can't read very much anymore. I go through phases where I'm able to, but it really zaps it drains me now. So what I've actually done is I listen to audiobooks while I'm crafting now. And before this happened, I used to hate audiobooks. I can't do it, they're too slow. I was a faster reader than, I wouldn't say I was a fast reader, I would say that I was an average reader, but it's a lot quicker to read than it is to say the words. So audio books I didn't used to like. Now I've now trained myself to be able to listen to them. So me and my partner listen to anyways, so what I'll do is I read mainly fantasy and sci-fi. I probably should have started that. I mainly read fantasy and sci-fi. So I've got 2 recommendations of my favourite fantasy and my favourite sci-fi. So we'll start with fantasy because I'm a fantasy nerd and I read more fantasy than I do sci-fi. So my favourite fantasy series is The Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. So this is a special illustrated edition of the first book in that series. I haven't got any of the other illustrated editions, so I just wanted one of the first one. And I'm just going to try and show you some of the artwork because it's beautiful. So yeah, and it's called The Assassin's Apprentice, and I don't, the title sounds like it's going to be like Assassin's Creed, like it's going to be these people going around and killing people in the dark, but it's not. It's this beautiful but also grim fantasy world, and we follow the main character through childhood and teenagerhood in this book, and he is such a well-realised character. Like some of the characters in these, so it's a series of 16 books that split into like trilogies and one set of 4 books, and you can read them standalone, but they do all tie in together. And the world she creates is amazing. And because it's 16 books, you get to know the characters so well, and I cried so many times during that series. Like the author is a bit sadistic. She puts the main character through some horrible situations, but the world is just it's like nothing I've ever read, and it's my absolute favourite series of book. I read them through twice and I'm itching to read them through again, because I love the characters so much. Her character work is just insane. So yeah, so that's my fantasy recommendation. Only 3 of the 5 trilogies follow that character I was talking about. The other 2 follow some different characters. My actual favourite trilogy is the second one that doesn't follow the main character. It's called The Live Ship Traders, and you can read them independently of the other books, and it's amazing. It's about ships that talk. It's awesome. And dragons and sea serpents, and I'm not going to say any more because honestly it's some of the best fantasy I've ever read, that trilogy. So yeah, and then my sci-fi recommendation is John Wyndham, who is a sort of sci-fi dystopian future writer from like the 50s, I think. And this is Day of the Triffids, which is my favourite, and my other favourite of his is the chrysalids, which is really good. That's dystopian future. This is dystopian too. It's like, so spoiler alert if you don't want any spoilers for this book, because I really, really recommend it. Post-apocalyptic world, everyone's gone blind, and carnivorous plants are attacking people, basically. That's that book. It's really good. So yeah, spoilers over now. And then this one you might know, it's been made into a film, The Midwich Cuckoos. So yeah, if you're into sci-fi or dystopian fiction, this is this author. And then in terms of audiobooks, so audiobooks, me and my partner have been listening to audiobooks actually. So the audiobooks, we listened to The Chrysalids by John Wyndham over Christmas, in the car over Christmas and things like that. So we listened to that, and then now we're listening to the second book in this is Brandon Sanderson. He's a prolific fantasy author. He like churns out books like no one's business. So yeah, he's a prolific fantasy author, and this is the first book in his Mistborn series. So I actually read this book before I got ill, and now my partner's also read it. He's also into crafts. So some evenings, not every evening, I will sit and I will do some crafts, and he'll sit and do his cross stitch, and we will listen to the second Brandon Sanderson book on audiobook, and I really enjoy it. And then I have got an audiobook that I'm doing, and I don't think this is going to surprise anyone that the other audiobook that I'm listening to is The Lord of the Rings. I've listened to the first and the second one, and I'm now on the third one. So I'm not going to talk any more about books, but that's kind of what I'm up to. It's not going to be a regular segment on this podcast because I don't think I read quick enough for it to be a regular segment. But yeah, I hope that's been helpful and you enjoyed listening to my books. So I guess now the only thing left to talk about is the giveaway. Okay, so the giveaway is a giveaway of patterns. There are going to be 2 winners for 2 different patterns. They're not my patterns. They are patterns by Heather from HG Designs. She's a fellow YouTuber and she's an established crochet designer, and she does some amazing designs with granny squares. So if granny squares are your jam, this is going to be the giveaway for you. So her most 2 recent patterns are the Arrival blanket that I'll put here, and the Love Struck blanket that I will put here. And she is offering 1 free pattern of each of these to 2 lucky winners. So 1 winner will get this pattern and 1 winner will get this pattern. So yeah, I will link all of her YouTube and designer info down in the description. Her content is so colourful. I love it. I love that I've found her on Instagram and I love seeing her posts. She's really down to earth as well. She does lots of like vlogs and podcasts relating to crochet and crochet designing, and she's really kindly like answered some questions and given me some great advice through DMs on Instagram as well. So yeah, she's a really nice lady. So if you're looking for someone else to watch on YouTube or designs. But anyway, right, giveaway. I'm going off on a tangent again and just fangirling over people like I fangirled a bit over Common Thread Fibre earlier, didn't I? I think I'm allowed to do that. This is a chatty podcast and I like fangirling over people. So yeah. Anyways, so this giveaway is not in association with YouTube or Google or anybody else. It's just me and Heather. And what I would like you to do is in the comments, let me know what your current work in progress is. And what I will do is I'll use a random number generator to find 2 winners in those comments. And then in the next podcast, I will have a little segment where I show who the winners are using the random number generator. So a quick note, I will not reply to your comments saying you've won. There's some scams going around on YouTube at the minute with giveaways where they pretend to be the person doing the giveaway and comment to someone saying they've won, and then they sort of like harvest their information or get money from them in somehow for like postage or whatever. I will not do that. I won't do that. I want to make sure that there is no scammers around. So I will announce it, who the 2 winners are in the next podcast, and I will tell you to contact me to claim your prize. So that is what we're going to do with that. So yeah, if you watch other podcasts, you will have heard other people talk about these scams. So yeah, so I will announce it in June's podcast, which will probably only be in a few weeks' time after this actually gets edited and put up, because I'm recording May so late. I'm going to try and do better in future, but like, I have a chronic illness, so I can be a bit unpredictable. I have pre-recorded enough videos for YouTube that I will have a video up every Friday. So even if I'm unwell that week and I can't work at all that week, I can't do any filming. I say work, it's not really work. I can't do any filming. I can't do any pattern writing or any posting that week because I'm so unwell. There will be a scheduled post coming out every Friday. So don't worry in terms of that though. You will keep getting those crochet tutorials that I know a lot of you really love seeing every week. So yeah, that's the end of my podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, and if you fancy seeing last month's podcast, I'll pop it on the screen now, and I hope you all have a great May.